This is All India Radio Mangalore. Dear listeners, in today's Talk in English program, Dr. Rajalakshmi NK will speak on the topic, The Study of Language and Literature at the Present Time.
The study of language and literature has drawn our attention in the recent past for various reasons. My talk would focus on the language inculcated through institutionalized education system. Being a teacher of English, the study of English has bothered me quite often from the point of view of students as well as a teacher. Often I have wondered why language is being taken for granted always. Of late, I have often wondered how language gets constituted within us. The language used in the public spaces like the social media, mass media, panel discussions in the TV channels, where participants from various walks of life, varying from an artist to a politician to a student leader, participates. From where do people pick up the language? Or is it taught to us in education institutions? Or is language inbuilt in us? The vocabulary of siblings in a house varies. The choice of words used by a set of students in a classroom to write on a particular topic is not the same. And I have come across students who literally search for right words to express their thoughts and feelings, and many a times they fail to frame their thoughts clearly in words. This was not the case when I was a student in 1980s. What brought this transformation in us? Let me begin by looking at what language means to us. Oxford English Dictionary defines language as, I quote, the principal method of human communication consisting of words used in a structured and conventional way and conveyed by speech, writing, or gesture, unquote. Further, it is explained, I quote, a system of communication used by a particular community, unquote. But when we delve deep into language, we realize that language is much more than this. If language is just a method of human communication, then it should have been possible for us to have one language for whole of the human race. It is just a matter of coding and decoding the signs. We have innumerable languages, and each language has several variants and dialects. The uttered sounds differ in meaning from one community to another, and at the same time, for a single meaning in different languages, different words exist. For example, the word sick, to an Englishman it would mean the ailing person, whereas for a Punjabi it would mean the native man. This makes it very clear that the meaning of a word is specific to a particular group of people or community. The language allows a person to enter into that community. The language allows a person to enter the culture of a community. Language and culture are interrelated. They are inextricably linked. You can't understand a culture without first learning its language. It is through the language of a community its culture is understood. Conversely, language is also the expression of a culture. Keeping this basic assumption of language as a method of communication and as the reflection of culture, let us see the purpose of English language study in schools and colleges. English is not the mother tongue of the majority of the Indians. English language study begins with certain basic assumptions and works within a certain premise. Some of these assumptions are like being a global language, it has become an essential language for an educated person. English opens up new vistas of knowledge to man. English is a window to the larger world. Knowledge of English opens better job opportunities. With these assumptions, the study of English language begins. Many students find English hard nut to crack. The culture-specific terms do not permeate into their minds, cracking the cultural barrier of the learner with the culture of the English language. Till the beginning of the 21st century, the syllabus of the English language studies in undergraduate courses included classics, canonical texts, and poems. Shakespeare's plays were thoroughly enjoyed in classrooms and on stage too. The annual scheme provided them time to enjoy literature and gradually imbibe the language embedded in literature. The annual scheme was replaced by a credit-based semester scheme in 2006. The nomenclature of English language studies was changed to general proficiency and communicative English. The leisurely enjoyment of language studies was replaced with quick learning. The syllabus too saw a noticeable transformation. Shakespeare's plays and classical texts were replaced with one-act plays and short stories. But the Board of Studies in English made a strong note in its preamble that communicative English in the syllabus presupposes imparting intensive practical training with the aid of language laboratory, especially required for spoken and listening skills, to small batches of 5 to 10 students. It also mentioned that large number of trained teachers required to fulfill the needs of imparting the knowledge on communicative English. It also emphasized the need of technicians to the labs. This ideal was not made possible in any institution. The board notes that if these requirements are not fulfilled, the student will neither learn English traditionally nor do so in the newfangled way. One cannot ignore the fact that as the society advanced in its pace, similar changes were noticed in education too. Education gradually saw a significant change in due course of time, responding to the needs of the society. The country was embracing science and technology. The needs of the techno-oriented world was different. The slow, value-based education was seen as outdated mode of education, and that was the time that the semester scheme was introduced, with learner-centered quick mode. When an IT company was recruiting a lot of employees for its BPO posts, the company noticed that the candidates were not up to the mark when it comes to fluency in English, and they had to train the employees in language fluency. Large number of these candidates were graduates. In fact, the company came forward to train the college teachers in specific areas of communication so that they can train their students accordingly. In due course of time, the English language study changed its nomenclature and the paper was titled General Proficiency and Communicative English. In fact, it was an attempt to fulfill the needs of the IT companies. The study of language aimed at proficiency, fluency, and developing communication skills to learners. The language that was seen as reflection of culture in the academia began to address and fulfill corporate cultural needs. The fineness of literary language gradually was being pushed to the background. General proficiency was achieved by learning the language through short stories, one-act plays, and essays, which comprised 60% of the syllabus, and remaining 40% was purely grammar and composition. In the 21st century, the rapid change in the idea of development, opening up of global job opportunities in large numbers, and the recent pandemic has brought a sea change in the mode of education. The new education policy has an entirely different understanding of English language study. The syllabus hardly has any literature. 20% of the course study has a few essays, a couple of poems, and a couple of short stories. No scope for plays or novels. The luxury of the leisurely past is completely gone. 80% of the language study is devoted to developing different language skills like writing, reading, listening, and speaking. But at the end of the day, do students speak good English? Do they know the culture of the language? Do they get better jobs than the past? Language that is intrinsically woven with a culture from which it emanates is severed from it, and it is learnt like any other skill. It is like a skilled carpenter, skilled lab technician, skilled cobbler, the skill of the dexterous, not of heart and the humanity. The skilled people without the touch of the culture of the language use sapless words. The skilled language machines indeed. Take a look at the language that we hear every day in most of the private television channels, especially the news. It differs so much so from the language used by the news readers in All India Radio. A clear reflection of the culture of the channel is reflected in the language used by the respective channels. The strong stench of commercial culture, which runs with cutthroat violence, is reflected in the language used by its employees on the screen too. The fineness of the language, nuances of the language, the intricacy of the language of toleration and tolerance is hardly visible. Same is the case with large number of politicians too. Surprisingly, the teachers too have a language with a very limited vocabulary. The richness, the fineness is completely lost. Grammatically correct, equipped with all skills, with no life within the language, is the order of the language at present. Language is essentially a very powerful tool. It is not just a medium of communication or reflection of culture. Language constructs ideas, constitutes thoughts, and builds our creativity. The world of man is constituted through language. Without language, man cannot think. Without language, man cannot create anything. To express his inner self, to realize his inner self, language is obligatory. Education, as Jiddu Krishnamurti said, I quote, "To understand life is to understand ourselves, and that is both the beginning and the end of education," unquote. The new education policy tries to revive the Indian culture, and Jiddu Krishnamurti represents the very, very Indian culture. The study of language today has denied this knowledge of the self and the life. It is a dangerous path that we have tread, for which we have to pay heavily. We are moving in the direction of heartless, skilled, machine-man world. Artificial intelligence and machine learning will be accompanied by the robotic man too. The change in the society, the change in the role of education has led to a very passive learner. It is high time to revive humanities and literature in studies and build a beautiful language to build a beautiful world for tomorrow. The need of the hour is to look at a bird, to look at a tree, to look at a man dying on the road, and look inwards for words that can create a language of humanity. Literature has that healing touch, as religion has the power to heal. The study of literature through language can build this beautiful world and contribute to the constructive humanity.
Dear listeners, you have just heard Dr. Rajalakshmi NK speaking on the subject, the study of language and literature at the present time. This talk came to you from the studios of All India Radio Mangalore.